The Houston run for the Monster Jam Stadium Championship Series is over, and it had a lot of action to begin the 2021 season. Event manager Scott Olinski sits down with us to discuss the past 3 weekends in Houston and look forward to the first weekend of action in Florida in Orlando. This is the Monster Jam Teardown. Welcome, Monster Jam fans, to another episode of the Monster Jam Teardown. I'm your host, Joshua Lee. Joining me, as always, is our team of analysts, Joshua Tavares, Danny McGinley, and Wayne Chiaki. And a special guest joining us this week, Monster Jam event manager Scott Olinski. Scott, welcome to the Monster Jam Teardown, your first time here.
Well, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
Now, just before we get into everything real quick, just give a background of how you got into the sport and what you currently are doing for Monster Jam on the Stadium Championship Series.
So, yeah, I started 10 years ago with Monster Jam as an event manager. Worked in radio throughout college and then got hooked up with Monster Jam. And then a couple years ago became the director of operations for stadiums. And then back on tour for this year with the Stadium Championship Series. So real excited to be doing events again and definitely excited to be here talking about it with you guys here.
Let's get started with the news, and unfortunately it is not some great news that we are covering here. Houston 7, the final round in Houston, was originally postponed to this Saturday, February 20th, has now officially been canceled due to the massive snowstorm that is going through Houston right now. And it's unfortunate because we were really looking forward to this final round. It was going to be on the Sunday right after the massive 2-event day in Houston. And unfortunately, now we're not going to get to see that. But 6 great rounds in Houston that we're going to cover. But, guys, it's always not exactly a good thing to be losing a round. And now these athletes are going to have to focus their attention from the Houston track that they were just previously on now to the next track in Orlando. They're going to have to make a very tight shift in between their mindset.
Definitely, yeah. Houston having to eventually cancel round 7 was a big bummer, and I think it plays a huge factor into the points moving forward. I mean, 36 points is a big swing for some of these drivers that are, trying to make points and hopefully relying on that last round on Sunday to make it up. So now with one less round, it's really going to be tough for some of these drivers to get back in the groove.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be hard for a lot of these athletes to really, regroup and regather their thoughts heading into Orlando now that they have their week off per se. It's not a week off that they wanted, obviously, but, we wanted to see Monster Jam action in Houston again, but obviously that's going to be 36 points lost right there. So they're going to have to recollect heading into Orlando. That's going to be more points on their plate to carry over.
Yeah, I mean, like what both Scott and Josh were saying, 36 points is a lot of points for some of these athletes. And, we've seen a couple athletes go behind in points and move up in points. So, the 36 points could have definitely helped, but, weather is something we can't control. So hopefully everyone will take the week off and then we'll go into Orlando with a head of steam.
I totally agree with all of you guys. This is a big point season. This is one of the most competitive seasons in Monster Jam history. And it's just been getting like that throughout the years. So this is definitely a big bummer, but they're going to come into Orlando with a bigger mindset of trying to gain a few points and come up the leaderboard, because unfortunately there's a few drivers that missed out on the opportunity of extra points. So we'll see how it goes in Orlando. I'm looking forward to it.
Now let's cover the past weekend, which became only a one-day event on Saturday, but 2 stadium events in one day. The first time that has happened, at least in the United States, in recent memory. So it was great to see all the action happen so closely in one day. And it's hard to not talk about that weekend without talking about Ryan Anderson. He was dominant. He won both overall event championships. First, it was Tom Meents on a 3-event win streak. Now it's Ryan Anderson on a 3 overall event championship win streak. And Ryan's closing in on the series points, and we'll get to the series points in a moment, but I want to just stick on Ryan Anderson because it seemed like in Arlington he had a little bit of a slow start and behind the wheel of the Bakugan Dragonoid. Then he goes into the Stadium Championship Series, and he gets a little bit more used to it. But now these past 3 events, it seems like Ryan's perfectly fine with Bakugan Dragonoid, and it seems like he's starting, especially in that skills challenge in the freestyle competition, to get that chassis under him and really start to bring out that Ryan Anderson that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, skills has definitely been where Ryan's had it, winning 4 out of the 6 rounds in skills. So that alone, sets him up pretty good on points. And freestyle, we know how Ryan is freestyling anytime, doesn't matter what he's in. And racing, he hasn't had bad luck. He's made it to the semifinals and finals, which is setting him up well in points. For him to have 3 straight overalls, back to back, really set him up nicely moving now into Orlando and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, there's a chassis setup that, that really has gotten to his head. It's a transition in itself because you have 2 different body styles. He has a Jeep longer nose on his truck in Son of a Digger, and now he has to transition to a completely different concept body. He's got the horn in front of him, so it's a whole different distraction for him. And, the chassis doesn't help him either, so he has to get used to that setup to his liking, to where he can do his 2-wheel maneuvers like Ryan Anderson does so well. And his freestyling game, like you said, Scott, it's always on point, so you have to worry about that then. His racing has been getting there along the lines. It's going to carry up heading into Orlando, hopefully, because that's his, family's home turf per se. That's Digger Nation. So maybe we can see Kristen and Adam start to pick up in points then. We can see.
Yeah, I mean, especially this past weekend, Ryan was absolutely dominating, if I'm being completely honest. He was in skills really across the entire season so far. He's been up top, I believe, just about every single event. Freestyle, he's been super consistent. He had a great save, I believe it was the Saturday night show, where I don't know where he placed in freestyle, but he placed up high, and now he's up in second in points. He moved Bryce down to 3rd place, and he's moving up. And I mean, we've seen before how Ryan tends to start out a little slower at the beginning of the season, even when he's in Son of a Digger. Now that he's in Bakugan, he's starting to get his rhythm going down, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot more Ryan.
I totally agree with what you guys have been saying, and Danny brings up a good point there. I think a lot of fans out there thought that Ryan Anderson was going to have another 2020 season, whereas in the first few events, having technical difficulties and getting used to the truck, and then coming back into the second half of the season when it's already too late. And we've seen that other people were able to get a championship because of that. But now Ryan Anderson is getting used to this Bakugan Dragonoid truck, and he's absolutely throwing down. We saw him throw down some amazing skills runs. It shows how much control he's gotten over the truck in the past few weeks. It hasn't been long since he's been driving, and he's able to do the incredible sidewalls and bicycle to moonwalks and everything he's been doing. And I think he's going to be able to take over that series point standings in Orlando if everything goes well.
Transitioning over to the Monster Energy racing competition, and this weekend it felt like 2 upset winners. Corey Rummel in the first event, and the second event it was Bryce Kenny and the Great Clips Mohawk Warrior. I mean, we know Bryce is consistent in racing. That was one of our main talking points in the last episode, was the consistency we've seen from Bryce Kenny in racing, but we haven't really talked about Corey Rummel in racing yet this year. He kind of set the tour on fire last year in 2020 behind the wheel of Megalodon on the figure 8 racing course. He was getting into the semifinals and finals every event towards the end of the competitions, and now he is really starting to hone his racing talent. And I believe in the second event he also made it to the semifinals, and in the afternoon event he ended up winning the entire racing competition. We're finally seeing Corey Rummel back in the racing hot seat, and we're seeing Bryce Kenny now start to really take that consistency and put it into the victory lane.
Yeah, for sure. Corey, I think, is definitely sneaky when it comes to racing. I wouldn't have pegged him to win any of the racing competitions in Houston just because of the troubles he was having in the first few rounds. But it was definitely nice to see Corey pick up the win, and Bryce, as you said, he's always a threat. Looking back at the stats, he was just right outside of semifinals the first 2 weeks, or the first 2 rounds, semifinals the second 2 rounds 3 and 4, and then would have been in the final for that Saturday round 5 if it had not been for some unfortunate breakage there, and then winning round 6. So I think Bryce is going to be continuously one to watch in racing. And then, skills, I think, is his little bugaboo. And, he either does really well or, he doesn't score as well. So, if he could put some good runs together in skills, I think he could stay in the thick of things, where he was coming out of round 4.
Yeah, like Scott says, Corey is very sneaky when it comes to racing. Last year when he was in the figure 8 style of racing, Corey was pretty dominant. He kept up with everyone in that competition. Morgan, he pretty much dominated that competition when I think about 4 or 5 competitions and racing there. So, Corey has a lot of drivers' numbers, but it's just at a weird timing point where he can strike. And, fortunately enough, Houston, it played in his favor because that style of dirt is tacky. And, it hooks the tires of the truck, so it really doesn't, put down the power as much like his truck, which is so weighed down. He can carry the speed over in the corners and, peg it to the finish line. Bryce, on the other hand, he's had Adam's number for quite some time now, so him winning the final against Adam doesn't surprise me. But, Bryce is always competitive. Win or lose or draw, he's going to put up a fight, and that's what Bryce is here to do.
Yeah, I mean, Corey looked incredible for both events on the Chicago style racing, and, what we were talking about last week is, right before we recorded the episode, we saw that there was going to be a whole new racing style and a new track compared to what we saw the last 2 weeks. And, we saw Corey, I believe in the first 4 events, we didn't see Corey really get past, the first or second round. And then now suddenly we're seeing him grab a win and then getting to the semifinals, the next event on this track. So, he was super fast just across the board all weekend. Same with Bryce. He's been consistent in just about every competition for the entire season as of right now. So, him picking up a racing win was big. And, like Scott was saying, Bryce is great in skills as well. He's been one of the more consistent athletes in skills. So, between the two of them, getting a racing win was definitely really cool to see, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
I agree as well. I think both of them are big threats to this whole series point standings. I mean, I think Corey Rummel was just having a lot of unfortunate luck in the first few weeks of Houston. But like you guys were talking about, in 2020, Corey Rummel was extremely consistent week after week. He did amazing in racing figure 8. Obviously now we have some different racing styles, and that might have affected him getting used to them and getting the truck in shape to do that. But with the Chicago style track that we had the last few shows, it showed that Corey is able to take home wins if he wants to. He just has to stay consistent. And the same with Bryce. He did incredible in Arlington last year in October that we all got to go to the show, thankfully, thank God. And it was an awesome time. But these drivers, they're incredible. And Corey Rummel is one of my favorite independents. And I think he's going to be a threat for freestyle and racing, especially in the future. And same for Bryce Kenny.
Now, one last moment that we want to cover from this past weekend in Houston before we just take a look at Houston as a whole in the series championship up until this point. It's Bari Musawwir grabbing an upset win in the freestyle competition on Saturday night. I mean, we kind of predicted Bari to be at least up there sort of in the mid-pack when it came to freestyle. He was on the first ever Stadium Championship Series, the Fox Sports 1 Championship Series back in 2015, but he's been on arenas since. An arena to stadium in freestyle especially is such a big jump, and it seemed like Bari couldn't really get over that hurdle in the first couple of rounds and back in Arlington in October. Now he's showing that he is here to play in Monster Jam freestyle. The fans love the zombie arms. Bari loves his Zombie Nation fans, and he threw down a great run on Saturday night for them.
He did. It's always great to see Bari perform. And it's something about when he goes early on in the lineup is it lights a fire under him that he just does something incredible. I mean, you go back to the All-Star Challenge when he was the first one to clear the triple and, ended up endoing back on all fours. And I even looking back at the 6 rounds we had in Houston, he went pretty early on in the lineup for each round. And he put on consistent freestyles. So it was really great to see him take out the win in round 6, and really can't wait to see what he does, coming up to Orlando, which is his actual hometown.
It's going to be insane. Barry hasn't been in his hometown of Orlando since 2018 of Triple Threat, but he hasn't been in Camping World per se since 2013 when he drove Spider-Man. So that's for him to compete back in his home stadium is going to be something that I can't wait to see personally because, Barry loves to throw down at any show he goes to. Fortunately enough, he was able to pick up a freestyle win. Saturday show, I was saying like during his freestyle run, like, dude, Barry needs to get a freestyle win. He hasn't had one in a long time. And I'm waiting for him to break that barrier to get to that. And, Saturday night, it showed and it paid off. So hopefully he can carry that steam heading into Orlando. We can see bigger and better things.
Yeah, I mean, since the beginning of this series, Barty's had great freestyles, and like Scott said, he's always been going out early, but he's always set the bar. But it just seemed like, at this particular event that he had a lot more momentum. He was getting a lot more air out there, and he went out. I want to say fourth or fifth during the Saturday night show. So he went out a little later. He had a couple drivers going out before him to see, how the track was going, because I know a lot of drivers were, trying to feel the track out. But, Barry went out there, he aired it out, he went out and did what we all expect Barty to do. And, he finally got that freestyle win. I was so happy to see that. It's always cool to see someone different get a freestyle win like that. So, if Barty can keep that momentum up and that, the big air that he was getting on Saturday night, then I think we might see even more freestyle wins from him.
I definitely agree. I think Barry Musauer is one of the coolest Feld drivers out there. He got his start in Monster Jam from the RC world and started driving in Spider-Man and a few other trucks. And getting this win in Zombie just a week ago, I was super pumped because Barry hasn't had a win in a while, because you have all these huge competitors that just go bigger and do more crazier stuff because Barry's at the beginning of the lineup. He doesn't know what's going to happen, and it's just the luck of the draw. But seeing Barry get the win in Houston made me smile, and I hope when he comes back to Orlando this coming week, he gets some type of win or an overall. I'll be really pumped. That's his hometown. His family's there, going to be watching, and I'm going to be there too. It's going to be incredible.
Wayne just made a really good point in that this lineup is so vast and great that Barry kind of goes down in the middle of the pack in freestyle. When you put him against any other lineup, he might have a legitimate shot to win the freestyle competition. But with Ryan Anderson, Adam Anderson, Tom Mentz on that tour, it becomes very difficult to get those freestyle wins, and Barry finally did it. Now we take a look at the series point standings, and Ryan Anderson has closed that gap. It's down to 9 points now, separating Tom Mentz and Ryan Anderson. Bryce Kenny and the Great Clothes Mohawk Warrior, he's in the conversation too. He's back 18 points. Then we take a look at Monster Energy and Todd LeDuc, 25 back. Megalodon Adam Anderson, 28 back. So all these top five, they're still in that hunt for the series championship for all of them in a single event. Any of them can take the series points lead. This is a very close points battle that we're love to see on these championship series.
Yeah, it's great. When I was still a tour manager doing the FS1 series, I'd have Adam and Neil and Todd that were always neck and neck all the way down to the last event. So to see it, starting to unfold here is really good. And, after the first couple rounds, Todd took that early lead, and it was like, okay, is anybody going to come back and challenge him for it? And, Ryan this past weekend really chomped at the bit, and only down 9 points. And then Bryce, he only lost 1 point from where he was, but now he's down a spot. Not being able to qualify for a score in freestyle in round 5 really hurt him in keeping momentum, but he's still close, and then you have Todd and Adam rounding out the top 5, like you said, and all it takes is one good night from any one of those to break into that lead that Tom has.
Yeah, and this could be said for any other athlete on this tour. No matter what competition you're in, you want to make sure you execute everything you do in it, because those are crucial points you can lose out on. So, like per se, if you lose early round 1 in racing, you want to make sure two-wheel skills or skills per se and freestyle is your best. Because if not, you're going to lose out on points. You're going to slim down to at least maybe 6th or 7th. You don't want to do that when you have so many great talented athletes on this tour. Right now, per se, you got Adam in 5th right now. He lost out on skills and freestyle on a show, and he's still in the top 5. So, that goes to show that consistency is key in this tour, consistency is key in the tour right now.
Yeah, like we were just saying, like we've been saying since, we started covering this tour, that the points have been just so close. We've seen, Men's hasn't given up that lead yet, but Ryan's only 9 points away, and all it takes is for Men's to just mess up in one or two competitions, one of these Orlando shows or one of these coming Florida shows, and then suddenly Ryan's in the lead, or even Bryce Kenny's in the lead. So with how close these points are, there's really no telling who's going to win. I mean, right now I think Ryan Anderson has the momentum. But, we still see Bryce do a lot more, and Men's could even keep this lead going for this entire series.
Yeah, I think the points are extremely close this season. It really gives me last year's vibes for the Triple Threat East and West tour, which we were all watching all the time throughout the other podcast that you had, Josh. The competition was so close every week, about 5 weeks before the finish of the whole season. And it was Tyler Meninga and all of the other drivers that were always neck and neck. And you weren't going to know who's going to win until the show comes because of mechanical failures or a driver mistake or anything happening. And that's what I'm really feeling with this year's Stadium Championship Series tour. You got Tom Entz, Ryan Anderson, and Bryce Kenny in the top three. And even though Bryce was hurt from not being able to get a freestyle score, he's still right there, like Scott said. And I'm looking forward to what's going to happen this season. It's really close. And I think Orlando and Tampa are going to make a big difference in what happens.
I can't think of a series in recent memory where the leader could blow an engine during introductions and drop to 5th in the standings. It is so close how this is going right now. And we'll transition over now to the Monster Energy racing competition out of Houston. And looking at those racing records, top of the board is Adam Anderson and Megalodon, 12-4 coming out of the Houston run. Bryce Kenny is right there, 11-4. The Gears and Nachos duo is definitely prevailing when it comes to the Monster Energy racing competition. Cole Venard, 9-4, another good record. It can even go as far down as a couple other good records. You can see Ryan Anderson, 6-6. Bari Musauer, 5-6 on his return to stadium racing after a couple of years. That's a good racing record. And then just taking a look at those and the storylines that are coming out of it, I want to stick with Adam Anderson and Bryce Kenny here for a moment. We already kind of went to Bryce Kenny a little bit earlier on, but I want to really focus on Adam Anderson because in Arlington, he couldn't find his footing behind the wheel of Megalodon. Then he goes into Salt Lake City, and it seems like through the first 3 events, he was still kind of trudging through the mud to get used to that truck. Then in the last 2 events, he took home both overall event championships. And then he came into Houston. He was on a roll when it came to racing. He was unbeatable in the first couple events when it came to Monster Energy racing. Finally, some athletes started getting over him, but still the best racing record out of anybody at 12-4. Adam looks to be the truck to beat when it comes to especially St. Louis style racing that we're going to see return here in Orlando.
Yeah, Adam was incredibly frustrated in Salt Lake. Had a chance to talk to him a little bit throughout the course of that weekend, and it was a lot of finding his footing in the truck and just trying to put everything together. And it obviously showed in Houston. Only not making the semifinals in round 3. So he's really putting everything together, and he is the one to beat. Bryce, again, incredibly consistent, and had it not been for round 5 where Bryce wasn't able to make the final round, could we be looking at a tied record between the two? And, it's Adam and Bryce on every tour. There's always something bound to happen with racing. And it's always exciting when those two pair up together. So, definitely going into Orlando and then Jacksonville and Tampa, it'll be interesting to see how they line up in the future brackets, especially coming out of round 6. So in Orlando, they're on opposite sides with Bryce finishing first and then Adam second. So can they make their way to the final round again?
Yeah, you make a good point with Adam. It took him some time to get, really used to the truck that he was in. It's a whole identity change for him that he has to really, come into one. And to be honest, Adam is in a tough predicament because, racing is always good for him. He can lay down some fast laps, no matter what truck you put him in. But I think the thing that's just messing him up the most is just dialing the shocks and, getting him right for freestyle because, he wants to air out that truck. He wants to do crazy stuff, but he doesn't want to hurt himself doing so. He's pushing his limits. He said that on his, Instagram story that he's pushing his limits with the truck. So that alone says that, he's doing his best to stay consistent. In racing, he's always fast. So we're going to see Adam dominate throughout racing. He's going to be in the semifinals per se almost every weekend if there's no issues. But he's always been consistent. Same with Bryce. I can't wait to see what this duo has for the next couple of events.
Yeah, I mean, since really Adam started driving, he's been one to watch in racing, and he showed that again in Houston. And, with his racing record being the best, that just shows once again that he's going all out in racing. But Bryce is like, it just seems like Bryce is in like second or third place in like every stat or every competition. Like it just seems like he's just right there at all times. So I mean, it's really, Bryce is really someone to keep looking out for. Between the two of them, like they're one personally, they're one of my favorite matchups that you can see in racing because like we've seen multiple crashes and wrecks and great races out of these two because they always just tend to line up against each other. So, hopefully we can see that again in Orlando or, later on down the season because, these two are really the two to look out for in racing right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Danny. I mean, last year, I don't know which show it was, Anaheim or San Diego, or maybe another one. It was Bryce Kenny and Adam Anderson. In the final turn, they both ended crooked and wrecked into each other, and both were on their lids right next to each other's trucks, which was one of the biggest highlights of the season, one of the craziest crashes. But Danny is talking about how consistent Adam Anderson can be, especially on the Chicago style track. I was very surprised and very happy to see that Adam Anderson was doing really well and taking the turns perfectly. And like you said, Danny, Bryce Kenny is an amazing competitor too. And he stepped up his racing game after the Monster Jam breaking world records at Bradenton Motorsports Park going over 100 miles an hour. I think that really helped him in the truck because Arlington last year, he did incredible in racing, took home one racing win. And this year, he's doing incredible as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they could do in the upcoming shows.
And we transition from an athlete who is at the top of the racing game right now to an athlete that is surprisingly not at the top of the racing game right now, and that's Tom Meents and Max D. Fire. I mean, I just took a look at the stats while you guys were talking over Adam Anderson and Bryce Kenny, and he hasn't really had a good racing competition since the first event. He made it to the racing finals in the first event, and he got into the semifinals in event 2, but since then, it's either been a first pass loss for Tom or only winning one race out of the racing competition, and his record quickly downgraded as to now it being a 5-6 racing record. I mean, we're used to seeing Tom so dominant, and he was at the beginning of the series, but once throughout the series, and then once Chicago style hit, he lost to Jim Kohler and Barry Musauer in both of those events with the Chicago style racing. We're not seeing the best racing from Tom right now. What does he need to do to really get that racing back? Because we know Tom, he has won so many racing World Finals championships. We know he can be dominant in racing. What does he got to do to be able to show it coming into the Florida run?
Yeah, I was probably most surprised after rounds 5 and 6 with Tom losing in the first round, just because I believe he was one of the only ones on tour last year that competed in the Chicago style track. And while it was a little bit different with them starting in the center of the floor, it was still back to Chicago style, which a lot of these drivers haven't done. So for him to be taken out in the first round was shocking. Moving forward, I don't know what he's got to do. Mindset wise, after rounds 1 and 2, him making the final rounds, I thought he was on a tear, and then, automatically going into round 2, he already had those points. So, I think he's got to win in round 1, starting with Orlando, the first event, round 7, and then build on there. If he can, even if he doesn't make it to the semifinals or finals, if he could keep himself in round 2 to automatically get those 5 points, I think that'll help him in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. Assuming that coming into Orlando, it is going to be a St. Louis style racing course, Tom can, really take back, from what Arlington and, the first couple of Houston events has really, brought to him. He's carried some fast momentum into each corner, but he's always stayed consistent, regardless if he lost in, the semifinals or round 2. Tom's been right up there, and his skills and freestyles has kind of helped him in points, obviously. That's something that Tom, we could say that he's going to, just do naturally. But Tom needs to understand that he doesn't, or I should say, Tom needs to, really digress that those are not going to only help him. He has to really get through the rounds in racing if he wants to stay in contention, because Bryce and Ryan are right there behind him. And at any given point, something could go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, Meents in skills and freestyle he's always just right up there, top 3, top 2 even for most of these events. But in racing, especially just this past weekend, he had, he didn't make it out of round one, which, was really surprising to see. Is because, we all know Tom Meents is, one of the greatest on the track. And, I think that's almost why, Ryan and Bryce are catching up like this. Like we saw after week one, even week two, we were saying, how Meents is just dominating and everything. But now we're starting to see Ryan, Bryce, and even Adam and Todd start to, make up ground. So I think honestly, if Meents wants to hold this lead and, hold this lead throughout this entire series, which would be something incredible just to begin with, I think he needs to, really step up in the racing. We know he can do great. I mean, we saw him do great in the first two rounds, especially of the series. So, if he can keep that up and then keep the same skills and freestyle momentum, I think he will probably stay in this points lead.
Yeah, you guys bring up a good point about Tom Meents. I believe the reason why he had a lot of issues with the racing competition, especially with the new track, I was watching a lot of the live streams that some fans had on Facebook and stuff like that, and you'd see him go into a corner and just get on two wheels instantly. And I think it just has to do with the truck setup or how he's been taking the turns. Maybe he's not completely used to Chicago style, and he got too used to the current track they were using for 2 weeks. But Tom Meents, he's one of the best in the business, and I think he's going to be coming back in the coming weeks and getting used to it. I remember watching at Tampa 2018, him drifting around the corners in the Chicago style racing course. And that's why I loved it, because these drivers would just go crazy into the final turns, nail it, and hope for the best. Of course, keep it on the ramp. But, Tom Meents, even if he has a mechanical failure, I'm sure he'll go out to the parking lot, grab the most local Prius, make sure to get back on the track, and mash that baby into first and second. Wow, wow.
I was hoping you would have mentioned the Prius again. That really got us last time. But now we're transitioning from racing over to the Great Cliff Skills Challenge. And looking at the averages there, it's sort of all over the board. I mean, Ryan Anderson, a 9.081. That's the best average we have. Tom Meents, an 8.905, not too far behind other athletes in the eights. Bryce Kenny, 8.530, 8.219 for Adam Anderson in Megalodon. But then it goes sort of down from there. 7.952 for Todd Leduc, 7.837 for Bari Musauer. So it's a bit all over the board for these athletes in the Skills Challenge. And we've kind of seen a new wave of the Skills Challenge really come into play this year, because we're seeing really that you're going to need a bicycle. You're going to need sidewalls. You're going to need some sort of a wow factor to get those high scores. We're still seeing those slap wheelies and those walking wheelies from athletes, and those are good. And the donuts are good as well, as you can choose between two-wheeled maneuvers and one donut for the Skills Challenge in the stadium competitions. But we're really seeing an age of the Skills Challenge where you need that wow factor to be successful. Ryan Anderson's figured that out. Tom Meents has always had a wow factor in the Skills Challenge when he walks it off the backflip ramp and the maximum moonwalk. But those are the two athletes that are really dominant right now, and they're really bringing something new to each and every Skills Challenge that they end up in.
Yeah, for sure. And, when we first instituted the rule where it was either two-wheel skills or one donut, you'd usually have one Monster Jam truck that would come out there and do the donut. And now when you have 2, 3, sometimes 4 drivers going out and attempting the donut and still getting a decent score for it, it's really good. And I think it really plays into the track and how the dirt is consistency-wise, because if you can rip a good donut and, get some good rotations in there, that's a good wow factor. And you have Tom, like you said, with the maximum moonwalk. I think people have grown to expect it. Now with Ryan kind of having 4 out of the 6 skills wins, does Tom look to try something new and try to come up with a new wow factor to top the maximum moonwalk, or does he keep up with something that he knows is true and is always going to at least get him, in the top 3, 4 placement wise?
Scott makes a great point, in terms of the track, layout or the dirt consistency, or even just the drivers, per se favor of what they want to do. Because, in certain aspects, you might want to save the truck into the next competition because maybe you heard it the previous competition, or just because you just want to save it for, the sake of you don't want to damage it yet. There could be so many factors there that are played. Jamie Garner, one of the faster donut, rotations that I've seen coming out of Houston. Bari's, he already got the donut world record. He's got 2 of them, I should say. And, you already know that he's going to lay down one of the better donuts we could see on the floor. But, you know, a lot of these athletes, you got to understand that, you know, it's not sky release, slap release. They're not going to win per se against a moonwalk or a bicycle to moonwalk. You know, you got to think of different variations of moves. You got to put your truck in a predicament where you're not afraid to hurt it, but get it to where you can make the fans happy. But it's a really luck of the draw kind of situation. You got some of the best athletes in the game doing moves that, you know, they've done for years now that they could do comfortably and not hurt the truck. So it's just playing your odds in your favor.
Yeah, I mean, in the skills competition, we've seen a bunch of different moves, especially from Ryan Anderson, really, and also Tom Meents. But you know, like we were saying, how you know Ryan tends to go out there and he's been winning a lot of these competitions because he throws out like a wow factor in there. You know, he's tried different, hitting different ramps for bicycles and different stuff like that. You know, he hit the I believe in round 4, he hit the transfer obstacle and then tried to ride the bicycle across the whole sideline there. And even in over last weekend, he rode the bicycle just about a quarter to almost halfway around the entire track. So Ryan just seems to have it down, and that's what's scoring high at this point in the skills competition. But I feel like if you don't think that you're going to be able to beat Ryan's crazy sidewalls and wow factors and stuff, doing Meents doing the maximum moonwalk, or Bryce doing his really consistent moonwalks, are still going to get you in that top 5 at least. So I think that's also something to consider. And same with donuts, like whoever has the best donuts going to end up with a middle 8-point score there. So I think it really just depends on just trying to get as close to the top at that point.
Yeah, this is a good topic that you bring up. I like that the skills challenge has that option to do a donut, because we've seen in the past, whenever you get a mud show, these drivers have tried to do bicycles and it just doesn't work out sometimes. Like I remember in Tampa 2019 was one of the first shows that was implemented. A lot of people had to go for a donut because it was a mud fest that the show won. But this year, we were talking about it last episode. I think if you're a driver, your mindset, if you don't want to go and break your truck, save a few dollars on fiberglass and parts, and you see Ryan Anderson go out there for a bicycle or something crazy, I say the donut is a good option, because you see people like Jamie Gardner go out there, rip these incredible cyclones, which is a wow factor, like you said, and get a good score for it still, get a top 10 score, which plays out fairly well in the overall point scheme. It's not going to get you first place, but it's going to get you a consistent spot, keep your truck alive for the next 2 competitions. And when you have 2-3 show weekends like we've been having, it's key to keep your parts good and keep your truck running. So that's my mindset if I'm going as a driver. And I think the people I've been doing them are doing a great job. Tom Meents is probably going to keep doing his maximum moonwalks. He's been doing incredible at them. And Ryan Anderson, we'll see if he can walk out a full bicycle around the whole stadium one day. You never know. It could be done possibly.
2 athletes that were strong in the Great Clip Skills Challenge that I want to highlight here last year were Colvinard and Corey Rummel. And these are 2 athletes that are sort of middle to bottom of the pack when it comes to the Skills Challenge averages. Colvinard, 5.293. Corey Rummel, 6.194. And last year we saw them pulling off those great moonwalks in both of their stadium series. Corey Rummel even was pulling out some donuts in some places, and we really thought coming into this year that these 2 were going to be fairly strong in the Skills Challenge. But is that a product of the lineup again, where they can't really get too far up in the scores because other athletes are coming out and doing so well? Or is it just they're struggling a little bit in the skills challenge, and maybe the refresh of going to a new city, going to Orlando, an entirely new state as well, can kind of bring them over that hurdle and get some good skills challenge scores?
Yeah, Josh, I think it's kind of a hybrid of the 2, a little bit of bad luck and a little bit of lineup. I mean, this lineup is a very stout lineup. For having 12 trucks, it's 12 of the best drivers around. And having to go out and find something to do skill-wise that's going to wow the crowd and get them to vote more than what they voted for the last truck is something. And, looking at Cole, he only had 1 score that was above an 8. And I think it's a lot of just bad luck for him in skills so far. Last year, he was great in the competition, and even Corey. I mean, Corey's put it together well. He's had 3 scores that were above a 9. But then, he had that 1-6, which brought him down. So I think it's hopefully moving to a new city and a new look on things will help them get back to where they were, last year.
Yeah, like you said, the lineup is so stacked that like you have to really, outcast yourself to really, digress that you have to do something very different and very unique if you want to win because, Cole and Corey, they've been in, tours, in years past where, some other athletes, their skills competitions haven't been, they haven't been the greatest. So, they're able to get some decent scores, to help them further into the points there. So now that they're against, the 12 of the best in the skills competition or in Monster Jam period, it's going to be very hard to, win skills competition. So in that point, you want to, just make sure that you're able to stay consistent and high in the points, but you're able to, make sure you're able to make the next competition.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially with Cole, we've seen a lot of bad luck for him in the skills competition. He's gone out there, tried to do a moonwalk, and hasn't been able to ride it out like anyone that Bryce, Kenny, Tom Mentz have been able to. And I think it also has to do with Corey and Cole tend to go out relatively earlier in the skills competition, and when it comes to judging, the fans don't tend to score too high with the first few drivers to go out there, regardless of what they do, because they know that we're gonna have all 3 Andersons come out, Tom Mentz and all these big names. So I think that also hurts them at some points, especially when they go out early in racing. But like we were saying, like Cole and Corey both can do great things in the skills competition. We've seen Corey have great moments and Cole be super consistent with the moonwalks. And hopefully, like a lot of us have been saying now that going into Orlando in a new city, new stadium, new dirt and everything, that these guys will start to pick up the pace and skills because we all know that they can do just that.
Yeah, this is another good point. I believe Corey and Cole have just been getting some bad luck streaks going on here. With a combination of some mess ups, you don't get into gear in time. And it's hard to, in a 12,000-pound monster truck, be able to have all your focus into these moonwalks and these Paxton poppers that Cole does and all types of different moves. And like you said, Danny, the fans don't tend to score very high for the first few runs, which is why you have big names like Ryan Anderson and all of them take up these high scores. Not only are their skills runs like incredible, they're also in the middle to the end of the pack, and it really affects how the scoring goes. But I think a reason why these 2 drivers are being overshadowed a lot is because of the lineup. It's only 12 trucks, and it's 12 of the best trucks. It's a really hard lineup to get up in the stats for racing and skills and freestyle, which Corey was able to take home a freestyle win. And I think this is Team Scream's one of their best years yet. But I think in the coming weeks coming to Florida that they're going to be more in tune to send the truck and get more comfortable after all of these Houston shows. I think they're ready to go to a new state and start over fresh. So we'll see what happens.
Now we transition over to the BKT Tires Monster Jam Freestyle Competition. And before I get to the averages, I do just really quickly want to talk about Todd LeDuc and Monster Energy as a whole, because he is the only athlete so far this year to get multiple freestyle competition wins. We had a streak there where it was one winner per competition, and we had 4 unique winners in 4 different competitions. And then on Saturday afternoon, Todd LeDuc came in there, got his second freestyle win of the season. And then in the evening, that's when Barry Musauer got his first freestyle win. So Todd LeDuc only remains the only athlete right now to have 2 freestyle wins on the year, and it was a good run, and we'll get to the average in a second. But Todd LeDuc in Monster Energy is always so strong in Monster Jam freestyle. He's strong in any competition, but it seems like he always excels in freestyle. The 2014 World Finals freestyle champion, and anytime he hits the track, whether it's in Monster Energy, whether it was in Metal Militia or even Blue Thunder, he is so dominant in freestyle, and he's continuing that as we go through the 2021 season.
Yeah, Todd is great when it comes to freestyle. I'm surprised where he's been in racing. I thought he would have been a little further along in racing than he has been. Skills he's done fairly well, but I think freestyle he's really shine the most. And having the 2 wins, being the first driver to get 2 wins in freestyle, I'm not surprised at all. And I expect him to probably be the first one to get to 3 before everything's said and done. I think looking at the stats from the past events, though, there's in the 5 competitions that we can look at freestyle wise, whoever won freestyle that previous round has never finished higher than 6th in 4 of those 5 times. So I don't know if that's a trend or bad luck to win freestyle. It's something to keep your eye on for Todd, though. If that trend's going to continue of not finishing higher than 6th, he's going to lose points somewhere down the line.
Yeah, if Todd wants to stay up there in points, he really needs to pick it up in racing. Todd, like you said, hasn't had the best of racing seasons. Surprisingly, Todd's always been very consistent in racing, and this year hasn't been his, jack of all trades. But, in skills and freestyle, he's been picking it up very well. The first couple events, he's rolled over in maybe the first hit, or just because, the move he was going for it in a wow factor sense, he just rolled the truck and wasn't able to save it. But in freestyle, he's been laying down probably one of the, more solid freestyles, the best wow factors we've seen. Probably the craziest save I think I've seen in recent memory, recovering that truck in, I believe, Houston 3 or 4. But either way, Todd has been, on a roll in freestyle, and maybe he can carry that momentum heading into Orlando.
Yeah, I think Todd just has like this rhythm down at this point with freestyle, where it seems like, he knows like exactly what he wants to hit when he wants to hit it, and then, he always tends to go for that backflip with which, in these last few events has been like, really like the main thing that all these fans really are looking for. So, I think that Todd getting the second freestyle one, it's definitely big when you look at how, no one else has more than one freestyle one, if one at all. So I think that really shows how consistent Todd's been in freestyle, and how, whatever rhythm he has going right now is working.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Todd LeDuc is one of the most competitive and one of the best Monster Jam drivers out there for freestyle. He throws it down. He almost won World Finals 20 freestyle with that incredible leap at the beginning. Nobody expected it, and then Tom Entz also came out, speaking of it, and did the same thing, tried to replicate it. But that shows Todd is someone who wants to put on a show. He doesn't want to give up. You saw him at the Monster Jam breaking world records. I'm mentioning it again. He didn't get the first double backflip attempt because the truck unfortunately quit on him. So he went in the pits, got it fixed, and came out for a second one. And it shows he's not afraid, and he is willing to do whatever it takes to get these wins. So 2 freestyle wins in the bag so far. I expect more to come. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Todd's going to do here in Florida. It's going to be incredible.
Now, I was looking at the averages, and I want to bring this up because most of the pack right now is in the 8s. We have 1 in the 9s. We have 3 that are under 8. So that means that we have 8 total scores that are 8 average scores, I should say, that are in the 8 range. And I was just looking through the past scores, and Houston 3 just stuck out to me because we had 7 athletes have a score in the 9s. That is unprecedented for a Monster Jam freestyle competition where over half the field is scored in the 9s. The max score is a 10 at judgeszone.com. So that is some really high scores being thrown out by the fans. And Houston 3 was a great freestyle competition. We've had great freestyle competitions for the first 6 rounds in Houston. But I just wanted to stick on this right now because those high scores are being thrown out. And it's not like they're being thrown out for runs that don't deserve it. These are great freestyle runs that in any other tour, I'd say they would rival for the win. They'd be top 2, top 3, but with this lineup, some of them are getting shuffled back to 7th, 6th, 5th, that any other weekend, they could be at the top of the board.
Yeah, I just went back to look at the Houston 3 scores, and freestyle has been, I think, the biggest surprise of all. Because usually, you're counting your 1 or 2 drivers that are going to get that 9 score for sure, and then everybody else kind of filters in between 8 and 7. But to have that many drivers finish with a 9, and that even carried through, into round 4. There was multiples in the 8s and 3 in the 9s. So I think the change in track definitely helped. And to be honest, I was a fan of the Chicago style. I think it gave drivers a couple different more options to be able to hit and cross thread, where the St. Louis style was more north to south. So I was excited to see if they were able to do something else on Sunday to really kind of compare. But I think it's definitely exciting going forward to see. I think it is a new age for freestyle and higher scores.
Yeah, without a doubt, it's definitely a new age of freestyle because, it's just such a stacked lineup, from top to bottom. We can't really throw out anyone that couldn't win. We have so much talented athletes. It's just like, even the one that you wouldn't expect to win could win, and like, per se, like Bari, we had Bari win, it's not that we didn't expect Bari to win. It's just that, Bari, he's been going early in freestyle runs where he's been outshined by other runs that have been gone later in the event. So it's been really hard for him to get higher scores early. So, fortunately enough, we've been seeing, scores get nines and, they've been, relatively high or low, but they're able to filter through. So where, they're even, but, you can't throw out anyone for sure.
Yeah, I mean, in like past years since we had this scoring system, like once someone would get into the nines, like that would almost just be like, like we just almost assume that that driver would win freestyle. Maybe there'd be someone else to possibly top them, maybe two nines, but most of the time that everyone kind of filter into the sevens and eights. But the fact that we're seeing like over half the lineup go into the nines in one freestyle competition just shows that that's the reason why we've had all these different freestyle winners across these 6 rounds, because like these 7 drivers all put down great runs at that show and they all deserve the nines, and that just shows how great this lineup is. So I think that we're probably going to see a lot more of that. And even like in other shows, like you have 7-8 drivers in the eights, and the averages are also mostly in the eights right now. So I think it's like really impressive for the fact that they're all sitting up there in the nines like that. And, I expect to see more of that going to the Florida run now.
Yeah, it really surprises me as well how many drivers got into the nines in that show, but it tends to show you how much the fans appreciated and how happy they were to see Monster Jam back and come for that specific show, because a lot of drivers threw down. And according to the scores, they did really well. It gave a lot of the drivers really good averages, and it was like a little boost to their scores, a bonus. But I'm really surprised, and I'm really happy that a lot of them did well. We have 12 of the best drivers in the industry in this tour, and it's awesome to see how incredible they've been doing. I'm really looking forward to the Florida shows coming up here to see how the Florida fans are going to score, because you're going from Houston to Florida, and maybe the fans tend to score lower or higher. I don't know how it's going to go, but we'll see what happens.
Now I want to throw this out for a roundtable discussion with everybody here in the call, and that is just your favorite moments from the Houston run, because this is the longest run in a single city that Monster Jam has ever had. 6 rounds in one city, one stadium, throughout the course of 3 weekends, and we saw a lot of great action. We saw a lot of upsets, a lot of things we didn't expect. And personally, my favorite moment from the past 3 weekends was just that first freestyle competition, because it was the first stadium freestyle competition since Arlington. Arlington had some great action, but it just seemed like each athlete was going for the win, and they were going 110% and as hard as they could during freestyle. We saw so many huge air moments. We saw so many wow factors. We saw drivers pulling off moves that we didn't expect them to pull off. So that first freestyle competition definitely sticks out in my mind. And I want to go around the call right now. What are your guys' favorite moments from the first 6 rounds of the championship?
I have a few. Obviously, Kohler in freestyle, I think, has been a highlight each round. I mean, I think he's had a save in every single freestyle, if not 5 of the 6. And it's just a matter of, like, what is he going to pull off next when it comes to freestyle? So I think that's always something that, for us being there every single round, like, what can he do? Can he top it? And he finds a way to each and every round. The other thing that I've enjoyed is seeing Jamie Garner's consistency. He's usually good at staying mid-pack throughout the previous seasons, but he's been very consistent in almost every competition so far, and he's really thrown down in freestyle. So coming into Orlando, I wouldn't be surprised to see him, put some string of good luck together and maybe squeak out a freestyle win like he did in Tampa previously.
Yeah,
And then the other favorite moment has just been, having 6 rounds in the same city may seem a little redundant, but, everything has been different. And when you look at the stats, even though Tom and Ryan are the only ones that have won overall event champions, there's been something different in every round so far, which I've enjoyed, watching from up in the booth for each round, and can't wait to see more of that moving into Orlando and then further on down the season.
Yeah, Houston, it was filled with so many wow factors and upsets and just overall craziness that I can't even, really begin to where I want to start on this. So but if there's one thing that I really have to choose, it's probably the resurgence of Team Scream as a whole. Respectively, Jim and Corey, they've been probably the best they've been in quite some time. Jim has always been up there. It's just that, he hasn't. It's just like he's been hitting a barrier, it seems, but now that he's finally teamed with Corey, the guy who pretty much put his chassis together for him, Corey knows that chassis like the back of his head, and, Corey's able to help him, get over that hurdle that, Jim's been, just hitting for the last couple seasons. And I think this is what they needed. And, they're, feeding off each other's, energy. And I think it's an energy that, I think can, empower them to be bigger and better heading into the Florida run.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick, one moment, it seems like, but I have to agree with Josh. I think that Saturday night's the first freestyle of the year, was just something to remember. In my opinion, is one of the greatest freestyle competitions in the last few years that we've seen. It just seemed like every driver just went out there. They were going big. We had multiple wow factors and everything. And, I think just freestyle as a whole across these 6 rounds have just been like something new every single time they go out there. We've had so many wow factors, so many saves, so much, big air crashes and everything. I think freestyle is, the competition that I'm waiting for every time, I go to watch one of the shows here. So, I'm really excited to hopefully see freestyle continue to go like that through the Florida run.
There were so many incredible moments from these Houston shows that it's so hard to pick, but I have 2 or 3 that really stick out in my mind. And the first being, which a few of you have brought up, is Team Scream, how incredible they're doing this season. I mean, that's what made me want to get this crew shirt even more. Jim Kohler and Corey Rummel have been throwing it down, and Corey and Jim both have a freestyle win. I believe Corey got 1 racing win. And it shows you that they're coming this year back better than ever. This is a great start to the season. I hope the energy transfers to Tampa and Orlando and Jacksonville and all these other shows, because they've had some unfortunate luck in the past, especially Jim Kohler with his truck. And it seems this season they have it all together and ready to compete. So that's my first favorite. And then my second favorite, I'm going to go with what Scott said. Jamie Garner and Overboard. He was very consistent, especially in freestyle throughout all of these shows. He was one that when we were all in a call watching the show live on someone's stream, we were all super excited and freaking out over how much air Jamie was getting. And he wasn't afraid to send it, destroy his parts, and rebuild the truck. So that was my second favorite. And those 2 moments were just 2 of the many incredible things that happened during Houston.
All right, Houston down and covered. We're moving on to Orlando, Florida. The first of the Florida run. Orlando, Jacksonville, then Tampa. Then the series goes to finish out in Arlington. But we're talking about the first weekend in Orlando. And it's another doubleheader day on Saturday, a noon event and a 7 p.m. event. And then Sunday afternoon, a 3 p.m. event with a pit party at 11:30. Get your tickets now if you live in the Orlando area, the Central Florida area in general. Get your tickets, monsterjam.com/tickets. Make sure you see there for 3 huge events at Camping World Stadium. But covering the preview right now, taking a look at the tentative racing bracket. Now, this is based off of the rule book of the racing finishing from the previous bracket, which would be Houston 6. Bryce Kenning getting a bye into round 2. Megalodon's Adam Anderson, Monster Energy's Todd LeDuc, and Rage's Corey Rummel all getting byes into the second round. Your first round matchups begin with Jim Kohler and Tom Mentz, Avenger versus Max D. Fire. This is their second meeting. They met first at Houston 5. and Jim Kohler ended up getting that win. Of course, that was on Saturday. Then it's Ryan Anderson and Bakugan Dragonoid versus Kristen Anderson in Gravedigger. This is their third time meeting. They met at Houston 1 and Houston 3, and they both have 1 win each. So we'll see who can get over the other sibling there in that race. Then Colvinard and Black Pearl versus Lindsay Reed and Scooby-Doo. They first met at Houston 6 this past weekend, and Colvinard grabbed that win. And then Zombie versus Overboard, Bari Musauer versus Jamie Garner. They met back at Houston 1 with Bari Musauer grabbing the win there. So an interesting racing bracket to begin the weekend, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on the weekend as a whole. Who do you think is going to be dominant now with the change of pace heading into the first time we're in a stadium on this series? An open air stadium. The first time we're back in Florida. It's a completely different dirt, completely different stadium layout. What are you guys expecting from this monumental weekend?
Personally, I'm expecting warm weather. It'll be nice to be in the 70s for once, than as opposed to the last couple weeks. But I think overall, 108 points are up for grabs this weekend, or next weekend, excuse me. So it's a really huge weekend for everybody. I'm looking for Bryce to definitely take a couple more wins. He was my dark horse in the beginning of the season, and I really think that Jamie's going to pull something out, at least in Orlando, to keep with the consistency. And then, in the back of the pack there towards the end, I think Kristen might be able to put some things together, especially with Orlando having the Hall of Fame ceremony on Saturday evening. I think she's going to want to make sure she shows out for her dad being there. And, I think Kristen will be able to put it all together come Orlando.
Yeah, you make a great point about Kristen. Now that Dennis is going to finally be inducted alongside with Scott Douglas in the Monster Jam Hall of Fame, Kristen's going to want to show out for her father and, represent Dennis very well. But, there's so much stacked, talent here. There's Bari, for instance, he's going to be in his hometown again. So Bari, he lost in the final round in the World Finals, and he's looking for redemption. Bari wants that win. He's chopping at the bit, I'm sure. There a lot of the drivers are, I should say, because they're losing out on the 36 points that they lost from the canceled Houston event. So, there's going to be so much action that I can't even, fathom to, begin to wait to see. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think, the really group of drivers to watch here is the top 3 men's Anderson and Kenny. Those 2 have just been, back and forth, it seems like, in every competition, every, at the end of every event, we've seen them just right up there in points. I think that, with how close it's becoming, that there's a really good chance that we're going to see, someone else take that lead over men's if, men's, can't get racing together, because we've seen Ryan and Bryce both do great in racing in all the competitions. So, I think that there's a really good chance that we may, see Ryan take the lead here and, capitalize on that. But, like everyone's been saying, like we could see, Bari take a win, Jamie take a win, Kristen take a win. Orlando's one of the, biggest cities that Monster Jam attends every year. The fans are incredible that we've seen every single year. So, I'm expecting some great events here.
I don't know what to expect, but I am expecting some awesome stuff to come about. Lindsay Reed is coming back to the stadium where she won her first World Finals Freestyle Championship and is your current World Finals Freestyle title holder. I think she's going to dial it up a notch and have that Scooby-Doo machine 110%. Some of these other athletes, like everybody's been talking about, Kristen Anderson is coming into this weekend and wants to make her dad, Dennis, proud, but that's going to put a lot of pressure on her. So I'm hoping that everything's going to go well, and I'm going to be rooting for Kristen. And Team Scream is coming into Orlando. They did incredible last time they were here, World Finals 20. Jim Kohler was in the main field. Corey Rummel was in high jump. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. And one more person I want to have my eye on is Cole Vennard in Black Pearl. He debuted Black Pearl at Tampa 2018, which I was able to see. And he came into Orlando that year and burnt it down. He did incredible. And I'm really looking forward to what he can do. I really want to see him get some type of win or get top fives and maybe take an overall that weekend. It's going to be incredible. I hope to see you guys there. And I hope all of you guys out there get your tickets. It's going to be one heck of a show.
And I've been predicting a lot of the same stuff that you guys are. You know, Kristen, I think she's going to get her first competition win. I specifically think Bari Musauer is going to be the one to beat when it comes to racing that weekend, because remember the World Finals 20 track? It was very dry, it seemed like, especially in the corners. You started to get that blue groove, and who mastered that blue groove really well? Jimmy Cretin and Bari Musauer. They both were in the racing final. So I'm expecting a great racing effort from Bari Musauer that weekend. Guys, it's time to put our money where our mouth is, and I've heard what you think's going to happen throughout the entire weekend. I want to know who you think is going to take home the first overall event championship of the weekend. Orlando won. Who's going to walk away with the hardware at the end of the day? We'll start with Scott, and we'll go through everybody else. Who do you guys think is going to take home that overall?
Gosh.
My reaction too.
I really think I think Bryce might be able to put it all together. So I think I would go with Bryce for round 7.
You know, there's a lot of athletes here that haven't been to Orlando, at least for a regular stadium show, in quite some time. So they're looking for some redemption to, you know, bring in some momentum as well for the Points Championship Series. But if I had to look out for someone in particular, it's definitely Bari. You know, Bari's been consistent in racing. We've known that. You know, obviously he's been getting through the rounds, but, you know, in some certain mishaps, you know, he either gets outbeaten or the truck beats him. You know, there's so many factors at play there. You know, if Bari puts his, you know, cards together, you know, in skills and in freestyle, I think we could see Bari take home an overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to agree with Scott here about Bryce. You know, it's, you know, both Ryan and Mens both have 3 overall victories at this point, and Bryce is, you know, the only one in that top 3 group there that hasn't gotten an overall win yet. And, you know, he's been right there. He's been, you know, second, third, multiple different events in the overall. But, you know, I think eventually and hopefully coming into Orlando for the round 7, you know, hopefully Bryce is able to put it all together. He's fast in racing. He's great in skills and freestyle. So, you know, I think, you know, Bryce might be able to pull everything together and get this overall.
You know, I'm going to go out of the pack here a little bit, and I think Ryan Anderson is going to take home another overall heading into Orlando. He wasn't too happy with the cancellation of the Houston shows, unfortunately, and he wants to show these Orlando fans a good time. Last time he was here, I believe, was in 2019 at World Finals, and he threw down a heck of a run. So he wants to come back, give some more performance to the fans, and throw down a wow factor and take home an overall, because it's in front of his dad, Dennis Anderson, and I think he's going to be able to do it in the first show.
Well, I'm also going to go out a little bit of the pack, and I'm going to say Tom Meents and Max D Fire. You remember back to 2016 in the FS1 series, he was having some bad luck in those first 2 weekends, but he came into Orlando. Me and Josh were both there. It was really cold. I'm hoping that cold doesn't come through in Orlando this weekend. But we were there, and we saw Tom Meents throw down one of his best freestyles of his career when he was trying to get up on Adam Anderson in Gravedigger, and I think he is going to do that again. He's coming in with a vengeance. He's lost 3 straight overall event championships. He's been out of round 1 in both racing competitions in the last 2 events. I think we're going to see a monumental event from Tom Meents and Max D Fire. That's going to do it for us here on the Monster Jam Teardown. For Wayne Chiaki, Danny McGinley, Joshua Taveras, and our special guest, Scott Olinski, I am Joshua Lee. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you again. This is Monster Jam.